Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the I Want to Believe tag. It was created by Rajathon and I was tagged by Jason Harrigan of Byways in Bookland. Thank you Jason for the tag, and I will leave links to both the original video and to Jason's video down below. So the I Want to Believe tag is inspired by The X-Files, which was an American science fiction television series from the 90s and very early 2000s, with a brief resurgence, I want to say in the early 2010s. I think I might have watched a few episodes of The X-Files very early in its run, but I was never all that interested in it. I remember not necessarily being fond of it. I much prefer space opera, Star Trek, Babylon 5, the remake of Battlestar Galactica, so on and so forth. But anyway, the tags, sorry about that, but the tags do seem, the prompts do seem interesting, so let's begin. Prompt number 1, pilot. A great beginning to a series or trilogy. For that, I'm going to go with The Bloodprint by Ausma Zehanat. I've talked about this book several times in book tags, but I think The Bloodprint is an amazing beginning to the Coruscant archives. It's about a young woman named Orion who, with her companion, I'm blanking on her name, Sania, are waging a two-woman war against the slave caravans of the Talisman, who are an extremist religious tyranny that have conquered much of the southern areas of their world and threaten the areas of Coruscant that have not yet submitted. Eventually, Orion and Sania are tasked with finding the Bloodprint, this ancient text which is hoped to give the women of Hera, who are keepers of knowledge and tradition, the power to effectively fight against the power of the Talisman. Love this book, and I think it is a fantastic first novel. Prompt number 2, Squeeze. Toons was my favorite monster in the series. I'm assuming, I don't know much about that. I'm assuming there was some human monster or some quasi-human monster who had the ability to squeeze into tiny holes and things. What is your favorite monster in a book? For me, that would be the Slake Moth from Perdido Street Station. So, in Perdido Street Station, it takes place in the world of Boslog and in the city of New Krobuzon. So, Boslog is a very weird, dangerous world. It is a world of mad science and mad magic. And while New Krobuzon is a wild place, it's not necessarily the most wild. There are other places where there are infinitely more dangerous beings. And one of those are slake moths. They are insectoid abominations that feed on human sentience. human consciousness, leaving their victims as mindless husks. Unfortunately, one of the methods of feeding baby slake moth grubs or caterpillars would be more appropriate is through milk. The slake moths can produce a sort of milk that can sustain their caterpillars. And this milk can be altered, cut into, manipulated to create a drug called dream shit, where the users can live the lives of the slake moth's previous victims. And the slake moths, several slake moths are brought to New Crobuzon, initially for some scientific purpose. But the returns aren't spectacular, so they are sold to a criminal who is himself quite monstrous. And they're pretty much, these slake moths are put to work producing dream shit. Unfortunately, one of the grubs, one of the caterpillars, are stolen and given to this scientist who is researching flight. And this slake moth eventually becomes a pupa, becomes a slake moth, and escapes and frees its siblings. And for weeks after this, New Crobuzon is terrorized by these slake moths, feeding on citizens and tormenting the dreams of everybody else. And they are just fantastic monsters. Love that book. Been far too long since I've read it. I really need to get back to it or reread it sometime soon. Number 3, The Erlenmeyer Flask. The one where they find a baby alien. What is the best sci-fi you have ever read? I'm gonna go with, I don't actually remember what Steve Donahue chose, but I'm going to go with The Expected Dune by Frank Herbert. This is a phenomenal work of science fiction, of world building, of characterization. It is just amazing. It is about nobles feuding royal families tens of thousands of years in the future, and how sometimes the best laid plans don't quite turn out the way you expect them to. And I mean nobody's, not even Paul Muad'Dib's. Okay, prompt number 4. Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. This was the only episode that won an Emmy. Oh, well that sucks. What is your favorite book? For me, again, this book has made frequent appearances on these tag videos, but Radiance by Catherynne and Valente. This is a diesel punk, ray punk sort of reimagining of Earth in the early mid 20th century, in which it is possible to significantly easier to travel across the solar system. it is also every planet in the solar system is habitable, one way or another. They are all habitable. Venus it's a jungle world, swamp. There are creatures called callowells that produce this sort of milk that is essential for human settlement across the solar system. Hollywood is on the moon. So it's a fantastic novel. The novel is really about a father, a film director, coming to terms with the death of his daughter and what happened to her. The daughter, while the father is the director of Gothic romances primarily, the daughter becomes a documentary filmmaker, and on her last film, she mysteriously disappears, and the father works through various scripts and stories to try to come to terms with what happened to his daughter, and never quite succeeding. And Radiance is by far my favorite novel, or really work, from Catherynne and Valente, and it is one of my favorite science fiction novels. Number 5, Jose Chung's From Outer Space, a funny abduction episode. What is the funniest book you have read? Or one of the funniest books? I'm going to go with Kings of the Wyld by Nicolas Eames. The conceit of this book is that mercenary bands who are hired to kill monsters, protect villagers, go on various missions, are equivalent to rock bands. In the language of tropes and archetypes, there's a thing called the five-man band, where you have the hero, the lancer, the big guy, the smart guy, the chick or the heart. And essentially, Eames takes this literally, to where the five-man band becomes both a band, a rock band, and a hero band. And he goes further with throwing everything in the kitchen sink into this, and it is just a trip. It is a royal, it is hilarious most of the time. Just absolutely adore this book. So it's about an old mercenary leader, captain, who gets the band back together in order to go on a cross-continental journey to save his daughter from a horde of monsters who not infrequently threaten this world. And it is a fantastic hoot of a book. Number 6, Home. This episode was very disturbing and was never re-aired on TV. What is the most disturbing book you have ever read? I'm going to go with The Mirror Empire by Kameron Hurley. It has been 2 or 3 years since I've read this book, and it is a grimdark. It is definitely one of the grimmest grimdarks that ever grimdarked. It's about a crapsack world being invaded by an alternate world that is even more crapsack. It's just torture and sexual slavery and mutilation. It's just the whole gamut of what makes grimdark is in this book, and it is just deeply disturbing. I have often struggled with coming back to this book. I didn't particularly care for it when I read it, but I think I probably should come back to it and give it another reread. But it's just so disturbing. I don't know if I really want to. Yeah. And also there are weird things done with insects. Okay. Number 7. Postmodern Prometheus. Which actually would be a very interesting title. This is a black and white Frankenstein-style episode. Not necessarily postmodern Prometheus. Well, I mean, I guess Frankenstein is, I think one of its titles is the Modern Prometheus or something like that. So, but I think there are other ways you can do with postmoderning Prometheus. Anyway, what is your favorite classic book? I'm not going to go with a book at all. I'm going to go with a series of short stories. But I don't want to pick all of the books down from my shelf because it'll wreck all of the books there. So I just pulled down one. And that's the Conan Stories by Robert E. Howard. I love these stories. They are, for the most part, all amazingly well done and just awesome. So the Conan stories deal with the Cimmerian Conan and his adventures from late adolescence. He's a teenager in the Tower of the Elephant to early middle age when he's the king of Aquilonia and the Phoenix on the Sword, the Scarlet Citadel, and the Hour of the Dragon. And it is just a fascinating and wonderful jaunt through various times in Conan's life. And I just love these stories. Okay. Number 8. Bad Blood. In this episode, Mulder kills a vampire, or he thinks he does, and then tells the story all in flashbacks. Which pretty much means this was probably a clip show. Or it could have been a clip show. Because oftentimes, a lot of shows... Because I know Stargate SG-1 was infamous for doing these sort of flashback clip show episodes. So, I don't know if it was like a legitimate flashback episode or a clip show. Anyway. What is your favorite way they use flashbacks to tell a story? I'm going to go with how Jenn Lyons used flashbacks in The Ruin of Kings. So basically, she uses 3 narrative threads. There's the present, wherein the main character, and I am blanking on his name right now. Kieran? Yeah, Kieran is imprisoned and awaiting something bad happening to him. And so from that point onwards is the present. But before he's taken from his cell, he engages in a back and forth conversation with his jailer, a monster called Talon. And they each tell the story of how Kieran got to where he is at the beginning of the story. Kieran tells a story through earlier flashbacks from various people who interacted with Kieran when he first becomes involved in the events of the novel through to the time he escapes the city. Kieran picks up the story from after he's been pretty much put on the slave auction block to the point where he returns to the city significantly stronger than when he left it. And it is fantastically well done. I thought there could have been a bit more details added, maybe more depth, but love the book. And I'm actually curious how, or whether Lyons sort of incorporates this similar technique into the sequels, or if this is just a one-off here and she uses a more traditional storytelling method in the succeeding books, or other maybe experimental forms. I really have got to reread this and move on to, let me check, The Name of All Things and the upcoming third book in the series. Ouch. So basically, Kieran has a bit of a destiny. This is a book in which the main character is foretold to possibly be a Dark Lord. He's really not. It's basically the world itself is crap, and his job's probably to actually reform it and make it better. But I really enjoyed the book. Ouch. Though holding it in my hands for so long kind of bruises it. Okay. Number 9. Drive. A man jumps into Mulder's cart and they speed through the entire episode. What book have you read that is a non-stop ride? I'm going to go with The City of Lost Fortunes by Bryan Camp. This book has made some rather frequent appearances in these tag videos, but I think it works in this one too. So this is a non-stop sort of action-packed story from the moment Jude Dubisson is invited to a game of poker to him becoming him being instrumental in deciding the fate of New Orleans, from battling various versions of mythological gods and fallen angels, and yeah, it's just a non-stop action-packed ride. Love the book. Probably will reread it sometime this year, and hopefully there is a third book in the series. Okay. Number 10, Milagro. In this episode, a book becomes reality when the author writes it. I wonder if Once Upon a Time stole that. Well, I mean, technically, they probably just were inspired by it. But anyway. What is a book setting you would never want to go to? Well, using what I've already had on the tag, Dune, I would not want to go to Dune. The Padishah Empire, or whatever it's more formally called. There's a system in this neo-feudal or sort of universal feudal system called the Frafrulacious, where every man or everyone has a place, and there's a place for every person, and there is no social mobility. There is no ability to really change your position in society. So, and of course there's also the world of the Mirror Empire, where quite frankly terrible things are likely to happen to you. perhaps at the hands of your mirror counterpart. Also, obviously there's Westeros, A Song of Ice and Fire, New Crobuzon and Boss Log aren't necessarily very nice places to visit. So, now the New Orleans of Bryan Camp definitely would be a cool place to visit. The answer to the bonus one probably would be a rather nice place to visit. So, not all fantasy worlds are terrible, but a good chunk of them, particularly Grimdark, are very terrible places. If not, there would be no drama, there would be no conflict. Bonus question. I hope the smoking man is in this one. 1 week, bare naked ladies. Okay. What is your favorite side character in a book? I never quite, I agree with Steve. From what I can remember, I never quite saw the appeal of the cigarette smoking man. It's like, I'm not entirely sure what the reference to bare naked ladies is for either. Anyway, but who is my favorite side character? I'm going to go with Max St. Valentine in the Tarot sequence by Katie Edwards. Again, I not infrequently hold The Last Sun up in these tag videos, but definitely by far one of my favorite side characters is Max St. Valentine. He is a young heir to the Lover's Throne. In this setting, Atlantis is real, and it's organized via the tarot. So the Atlantean aristocracy belonged to various courts affiliated with various arcana signs. The main character, Rune St. John, is the heir. Really, he is Lord Sun. He is the Sun Throne. His major patron is the Tower. He rules the Tower Throne. Max St. Valentine, his grandmother, was the head of the Lover's Throne before she was defeated and banished, and the Lover's Throne disassembled, or the Lover's Court disassembled. So Max is placed under the protection of Rune St. John as a foster child ward in exchange for a sigil, magical artifact in which magic can be stored into. And so Max gradually inserts himself, or is inserted, into the lives of Rune St. John and his companion bodyguard Bryan. And adventures and hijinks ensue from there. And when I read the book, I kind of gravitate towards him. He's my favorite character. And I think that's a good chunk of my criticism, I think, of the book is he's basically a butt monkey, and that kind of annoys me a lot of the time. So a good chunk of my criticism is probably geared towards how Edwards handles Max as a character. Although, Rune and Bryan do get on my nerves sometimes too, but yeah. So anywho, that was the I Want to Believe tag. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't done the tag, and you would like to, please consider yourselves tagged. And I will see you hopefully tomorrow with another video. And until then, stay safe if you're protesting. Please be mindful of the ongoing pandemic and take safety precautions and stay safe. And thank you, BookTube. I will see you tomorrow.